Nicolás Maduro drove a bus. He earned $40 a month. He lived in a 2-room apartment with his mother. He had a high school dropout's education and 0 political experience. 30 years later, he would control the world's largest oil reserves, survive a $15 million U.S. bounty, and outlast every analyst's prediction of his fall. How does that happen? How does a nobody become untouchable? The answer lies in a single year that's been erased from his official biography. 1986, the year Nicolás Maduro disappeared. When he left Venezuela in January, he was a union organizer with big dreams but no real skills. When he returned in December, he was something else entirely: disciplined, strategic, connected to networks that stretched from Havana to Moscow. That year, he wasn't driving buses. He was sitting in classified briefings at Cuba's Ñico López School, the same institution that trained revolutionary leaders across Latin America, Africa, and the Middle East. They taught him Marxist theory, intelligence tradecraft, how to organize cells, how to survive interrogation, how to recognize agents, how to build a revolutionary movement that couldn't be destroyed, but most importantly, they taught him how to wait. How to stay in the shadows until the moment was right, how to become indispensable to someone more powerful, and then inherit everything when they were gone. Fidel Castro had a saying, "Give me 1 year with a committed student and I'll give you a leader for life." In 1986, Cuba got Nicolás Maduro for a year. In 2013, Venezuela got a dictator for life. To understand what happened in Havana, you need to understand who Nicolás Maduro was before he disappeared, because in early 1986, he was nobody special, just another face in the crowd of Venezuela's struggling working class. He was 23 years old. Every morning at 5 a.m., he'd wake up in the small apartment he shared with his mother Teresa in El Valle, one of Caracas's poorest neighborhoods. By 6 a.m., he was behind the wheel of a metro bus, driving the same route he'd driven for 2 years. Line 1, from Propatria to Palo Verde, back and forth, 8 hours a day, 6 days a week. The pay was terrible. The conditions were worse, but Maduro didn't complain. He'd grown up poor. His father had been a union man, a leftist who taught young Nicolás that the system was rigged and that workers needed to fight back. That lesson had stuck. By 1985, Maduro had become active in the Metro Workers Union. He wasn't the leader, he wasn't even particularly charismatic, but he was reliable. He showed up to every meeting, he volunteered for every organizing drive. He had a talent for listening, for making people feel heard, for building consensus among workers who disagreed about everything except their shared misery. His real political education happened outside work. Through his father's connections, Maduro had joined the Socialist League, a radical Marxist-Leninist organization that dreamed of revolution. They held meetings in cramped apartments, studying texts by Lenin and Che Guevara, debating strategy late into the night. Maduro wasn't the smartest person in those meetings. He hadn't finished high school. He struggled with theory. But he had something else: dedication. While others talked about revolution, Maduro actually organized. He built cells in different metro stations. He distributed pamphlets. He recruited new members. And someone noticed. In December 1985, a man approached Maduro after a union meeting. Maduro had never seen him before. The man was older, maybe 40, with the weathered look of someone who'd spent time in difficult places. "Nicolás Maduro?" the man asked. "Yes. Your compañeros in the Socialist League speak highly of you. They say you're committed, disciplined." "I try to be." The man studied him for a moment. "How would you like to receive real training? Not theory in someone's living room. Real education from people who've actually built successful revolutions." Maduro's heart raced. "What kind of training?" "The kind you can't get in Venezuela. You'd need to travel for several months, maybe longer. You wouldn't be able to tell anyone where you were going or what you were doing." "Cuba?" Maduro asked. The man smiled. "Can you be ready by January?" 3 weeks later, Nicolás Maduro was on a plane, January 17, 1986. The Cubana de Aviación flight touched down in Havana at 2 p.m. Maduro had never left Venezuela before. As he walked through José Martí International Airport, everything felt surreal. The humidity was different. The air smelled like the ocean and something else he couldn't identify. Maybe revolution, maybe just Diesel fuel. Two men in civilian clothes met him at arrivals. No introductions, no small talk. Just, "Your bag. Follow us." They drove for 40 minutes, leaving the city behind. The compound appeared suddenly. High concrete walls, guard towers, armed soldiers at the gate. "No" sign indicated what this place was. The guards waved them through without checking IDs. Inside, Maduro was taken to a dormitory building. Rows of metal bunk beds. 47 other students were already there, some unpacking, others talking in small groups. They were young, mostly in their 20s, and they came from everywhere. Nicaragua, El Salvador, Colombia, Peru, Panama, Angola, Mozambique, South Africa. A thin man with glasses approached. "Venezuela?" "Yes." "Nicolás." "Carlos, Nicaragua." "First time?" "First time anywhere." Carlos grinned. "You'll learn fast. You have to. This isn't summer camp." That evening, all 48 students were assembled in a lecture hall. An older man in military fatigues entered. He didn't introduce himself, but Maduro would later learn this was Colonel Ramiro Valdez, one of Fidel Castro's original guerrilla fighters from the Sierra Maestra, a legend of the Cuban Revolution. "Welcome to the Ñico López School of Political Training," Valdez began. His voice was quiet, but commanded absolute attention. "You have been selected because someone believes you have potential. Potential to lead. Potential to build revolutionary movements in your countries. Potential to change history." He paused, letting that sink in. "For the next 12 months, you will undergo the most intensive political and operational training available anywhere in the world. You will study Marxist-Leninist theory. You will learn organizational techniques. You will be taught how to survive in hostile environments, how to recognize enemy agents, how to build networks that cannot be infiltrated or destroyed." Another pause. "Some of you will fail. You will be sent home. For those who succeed, you will return to your countries as weapons of the revolution. The training is classified. You will not discuss it with anyone outside this compound. Not your families, not your friends, not even other revolutionaries. What happens here stays here." Maduro looked around the room. Every face was focused on Valdez. Nobody moved. Nobody whispered. This was real. The first month was brutal. 5 a.m. wake-ups. Physical training that left Maduro gasping and questioning if he could survive. Then 6 hours of lectures, Marxist economics, Lenin, Gramsci, Mao. The instructors were relentless. Maduro struggled. While university-educated students asked sophisticated questions, he stayed quiet, taking notes, trying to keep up. But in the afternoon sessions on organizing and mass mobilization, Maduro came alive. These weren't theoretical lectures. These were practical workshops on how to build revolutionary organizations, how to identify and recruit potential members, how to structure cells so that if one was compromised, the others survived, how to use legal organizations, unions, community groups, student associations as fronts for revolutionary activity. This was what Maduro was good at. This was what he'd been doing intuitively in Caracas. Now he was learning the science behind it. One instructor, a woman named Captain Morales, who'd helped organize revolutionary movements in Central America, pulled Maduro aside after class one day. "You're not the strongest student in theory," she said bluntly. Maduro nodded, bracing for criticism. "But you have something more valuable. You understand people. I've watched you in the group exercises. You don't try to dominate. You listen. You find common ground. You build consensus. That's rare. Most revolutionaries are too convinced of their own brilliance to actually organize effectively." "Thank you, Captain. Don't thank me. Use it. The revolution doesn't need more theorists. It needs organizers. People who can turn theory into action. That's you." Those words changed something in Maduro. He stopped trying to compete with the intellectuals in the class and started focusing on what he did best, the practical work of building movements. By the third month, they studied intelligence and counterintelligence, how to recognize surveillance, how to resist interrogation. These sessions were taught by G2 intelligence officers. Maduro's simulated interrogation lasted 11 hours, his wrists raw, voice hoarse. But he hadn't broken. The instructor simply said, "Adequate." Later, Carlos told him that adequate from that instructor was high praise. The most classified training came in months 6 through 9. Special operations. How to move weapons undetected, how to coordinate with guerrilla groups, how to launder money, how to build parallel power structures that could challenge existing governments. They studied successful revolutions, Cuba, Nicaragua, Vietnam, and failures like Chile's Allende. The lesson: seizing power wasn't enough. You had to hold it. That required control of key institutions, neutralizing opposition early, and securing international allies. This was the blueprint that Maduro absorbed. This was what would define his approach to power decades later. In October, halfway through the program, Fidel Castro himself visited the school. It was unannounced. The students were in the middle of a seminar when guards rushed in, ordering everyone to assemble in the courtyard immediately. Castro arrived in a jeep wearing his trademark olive fatigues. He was 60 years old, but still commanding, still radiating the charisma that had sustained the Cuban Revolution for nearly 3 decades. He walked among the students, asking where they were from, what they'd learned, what they planned to do when they returned home. When he reached Maduro, he stopped. "Venezuela," Castro said, reading the name tag on Maduro's uniform. "Yes, Comandante." "What do you do there?" "I drive buses and I organize workers." Castro smiled. "Good. We need more organizers, fewer generals. Generals lose wars. Organizers build movements that cannot be defeated." It was a brief exchange, maybe 30 seconds, but Maduro never forgot it decades later. As president, he would repeat that story constantly. The day Fidel Castro told him that organizers were more valuable than generals. The final months focused on long-term strategy, how to sustain revolutionary governments. Most revolutions fail, militarily, economically, or from within. The ones that survive do 3 things: build international alliances, neutralize internal threats early, and cultivate patience among leadership. "You may wait 20 years for your moment," one instructor said, "but when it comes, you must be ready. You'll only get one chance." Maduro took careful notes. In December 1986, the program ended. Of the original 48 students, 41 had completed the full training. There was no ceremony, no graduation, just individual meetings with senior instructors who gave final assessments. Maduro's evaluation, obtained years later by Venezuelan intelligence defectors, was revealing. Subject: shows moderate theoretical understanding but exceptional practical skills in organization and mass mobilization. Personality type: loyal, patient, non-threatening. Assessment: suitable for long-term deployment in supportive role within revolutionary movement. Low probability of independent leadership but high value as lieutenant or administrator. Recommendation: deploy and monitor. That assessment, suitable for long-term deployment in supportive role, turned out to be prophetic. Because when Maduro returned to Venezuela in December 1986, he didn't try to start his own revolutionary movement. He didn't seek leadership. He went back to driving buses. He went back to his union work. He went back to being nobody special. But he was waiting and watching and building networks. In 1992, when Lieutenant Colonel Hugo Chavez launched his failed coup attempt, Maduro was there, not as a soldier but as a civilian organizer mobilizing support. When Chavez was imprisoned, Maduro visited him regularly, becoming part of his inner circle. When Chavez was released and transformed his movement into a political party, Maduro was one of the founding members. Through all of this, Maduro never pushed himself forward. He never competed for attention. He stayed in the background, reliable and loyal, doing the organizational work that held the movement together. He was exactly what his Cuban instructors had trained him to be, a patient, disciplined operator who understood that power comes not from seizing the spotlight, but from becoming indispensable to those who have it. When Chavez won the presidency in 1998, Maduro was rewarded with important positions: National Assembly member, Assembly president, foreign minister, but still never the star, always the supporting player, the guy who made things work behind the scenes. And then in 2012, when Chavez was dying from cancer and needed to choose a successor, he chose Maduro. Not the charismatic governors, not the powerful generals, not the revolutionary heroes. Maduro, the former bus driver, the loyal lieutenant, the man who'd spent 26 years proving he could be trusted. Why Maduro? Some said it was because he was unthreatening, unlikely to accumulate power that could challenge other factions. Some said it was because Cuba's intelligence services, who'd invested in Maduro back in 1986, pushed for him. Some said Chavez simply knew that Maduro would protect his legacy without overshadowing it. Maybe all of those things were true. What's certain is that when Maduro took power in 2013, he wasn't the bumbling fool that opposition leaders and international media portrayed. He was something far more dangerous, a man who'd been systematically trained in how to survive as a revolutionary leader, how to identify threats, how to neutralize opposition, how to build international alliances, how to use state resources to maintain loyalty, how to wait out crises. Every technique he'd learned in Havana in 1986 was deployed in Caracas after 2013, when the economy collapsed and millions protested. Maduro didn't panic. He did what his Cuban instructors had taught him. He consolidated control over the military by giving them access to corruption. He built paramilitary groups to terrorize opposition neighborhoods. He imprisoned or exiled opposition leaders. He strengthened ties with Russia, China, and Iran, the international allies who could keep the regime alive. When the United States put a $15 million bounty on his head in 2020, charging him with narco-terrorism, Maduro didn't flee. He did what he'd been trained to do. He calculated that the U.S. wouldn't invade, that international institutions wouldn't act, that if he could control the military and the intelligence services, he could survive anything. And he was right. Today, Nicolás Maduro remains in power. The economy he inherited has been destroyed. 6 million Venezuelans have fled the country. Those who remain face hunger, crime, and repression. By every measure, Maduro's presidency has been catastrophic for Venezuela. But by the measure that matters most to him, the only measure his Cuban instructors cared about, he's been wildly successful. He's still there. He's survived coup attempts, sanctions, diplomatic isolation, and mass protests. He's outlasted every analyst's prediction of his fall. Because in 1986, in a classified compound outside Havana, Nicolás Maduro learned something that his opponents never understood. Power isn't about being loved. It's not about having popular support. It's not even about being competent. Power is about understanding the mechanics of control and having the discipline to apply them ruthlessly, patiently, without emotion. Fidel Castro's promise turned out to be true. Give Cuba 1 year with a committed student, and they'd give you a leader for life. In 1986, a bus driver disappeared into Havana. In 2013, a dictator emerged from the shadows. And the Venezuelans who'd waited in line to vote, who'd believed democracy could save them, who trusted that the system would work, they never stood a chance. Because they were playing a game of democracy while Maduro was executing a plan 30 years in the making. A plan written in a classified training manual in Havana. A plan that began the day a nobody bus driver boarded a plane and became very dangerous. If this story revealed something about how dictators are made, hit that subscribe button. Share it with someone who thinks authoritarian leaders just stumble into power. Drop a comment about whether you believe Maduro was really groomed as a sleeper agent or if he just got lucky. And ring that notification bell for more untold stories about the hidden training grounds where tomorrow's tyrants learn their trade today.